With the stunning fall of Bashar Assad, we are witnessing yet another Islamic republic rising. We're going to see how the failed foreign policy of the neocons in D.C. is actually destroying the liberal international order that they so desperately are trying to protect, and what it all means for the rise of a far more civilizationalist and religious world. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your patriot professor, once again here to keep you sane in these crazy and insane times. So make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Before we dive in here, gang, let's give a huge shout out to one of our sponsors who make these videos possible, and that's Liver Health Formula. Now, if you're one of the 100 million Americans struggling with all the weight gain and loss of energy that comes with a fatty liver, these patriots are going to be your absolute best friend. Liver Health Formula is an all-natural supplement. It contains 12 clinically proven botanicals that help recharge and protect your liver. It's manufactured right here in the USA and approved by independent American doctors. And if you click on that link below right now, you can try Liver Health Formula and receive a free bottle of blood sugar formula when you order today. So don't let a fatty liver keep you sluggish and inactive. I tell you this every time, gang. You know this is personal for me. I recently lost over 60 pounds, and I could say it was one of the best decisions I ever made. And so now it's your turn. Click on that link below or go to getliverhelp.com/Turley. Claim your free bonus gift. That's getliverhelp.com/Turley. Syria has fallen. In a stunning turn of events, rebel forces led by a new Islamist militant group called HTS swept throughout Syria, capturing the major cities of Aleppo and Hama in a single week. Despite Russian and Iranian support, President Bashar Assad's forces failed to hold the rebel offensive back, and over the weekend, those forces collapsed, causing Assad and his family to flee for sanctuary in the Russian Federation. Now, obviously, the fall of Syria was nothing short of stunning. I mean, we have to remember it was just 4 years ago when Assad's forces, the Syrian Arab army, basically looked as if they had won. They had, with the help of Russia and Iran and Hezbollah, they largely vanquished rebel forces, secured anywhere from 60 to 80% of Syrian territory. But with Russian, Iranian, and Hezbollah forces largely disengaged from Syria of late, rebel forces organized and initiated a blitzkrieg offensive that took those presidential forces by storm. Now, while the situation is certainly complicated, I do see two major overall dynamics playing out here. I see an old Obama-era neocon foreign policy playing out, and at the very same time, we're seeing the rise of a new world, a civilizationalist world that involves nothing less than a return of the gods, as it were, a return of ancient theocracies. So let's start first with how the U.S. foreign policy is playing out here. This is Professor Jeffrey Sachs.
How out of control this could escalate.
It's true, but I think we have to step back and not put this in partisan terms. This is a U.S. mistake that started 7 years ago. And I remember the day on your show when President Obama said, Assad must go. And I looked at you and Joe and I said, huh? How's he going to do that? Where's the policy for that?
Right. And
we know they sent in the CIA to overthrow Assad. The CIA and Saudi Arabia together in covert operations tried to overthrow Assad. It was a disaster. Eventually it brought in both ISIS as a splinter group to the jihadists that went in. It also brought in Russia. So we have been digging deeper and deeper and deeper. What we should do now is get out and not continue to throw missiles, not have a confrontation with Russia. 7 years has been a disaster under Obama, continuing under Trump. This is what I would call the permanent state. this is the CIA, this is Pentagon, wanting to keep Iran and Russia out of Syria, but no way to do that. And so we have made a proxy war in Syria. It's killed 500,000 people, displaced 10 million. And I'll say predictably so, because I predicted it 7 years ago that there was no way to do this and that it would make a complete chaos. So what I would plead to President Trump is get out. Like his instinct told him, by the way. That was his instinct. But then all the establishment, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Pentagon, everybody said, no, that's irresponsible. But his instinct is right. Get out. We've done enough damage, 7 years. And now we really risk a confrontation with Russia that is extraordinarily dangerous, reckless.
So as you just heard there, that was a few years back from Professor Jeffrey Sachs. But as he explained, getting rid of Assad was considered by the United States, particularly our State Department, to be essential to pushing back against the rising Russian and Iranian influence in the region. And this, in many ways, is what the Arab Spring color revolutions were all about back in 2011. In the end, these were all State Department-initiated coups that sought to roll back Russian and Iranian influence in the region, all the while increasing American influence. And while the fall of Syria is clearly a setback for Russia, for Iran, for Hezbollah, no question about that, this morning, a number of analysts are questioning whether the regime change over the weekend has any benefit to the United States whatsoever. This is the new leader of Syria, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. He has ties to both ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and he, along with the militant Islamic group HTS, are now actively establishing a new Islamic republic in Syria, akin to what we've seen of late in the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. Far from ushering in a pro-American liberal Democrat regime, the demise of Assad is instead reawakening a very ancient form of government that, as it turns out, is actually seeing quite the resurgence, not just in the Middle East, but indeed all over the world. A resurgence that's taking neocons in D.C. completely and totally by surprise. We are witnessing nothing less than the worldwide return of theocracy. Now, technically, I'm sure you know, a theocracy is a form of government whose laws, legislation, judicial interpretations, and the like are all informed explicitly by a particular, usually ancient religious tradition. Religion in theocracies actually constitutes the foundation of the state, and as such, religion is an integral part. It is, as it were, the metaphorical pillar of the political legitimacy of the state. The key with theocracies is that all laws must conform to principles of religious doctrine, and no statute may be enacted that is repugnant to those principles. Now, with the rise of the modern secular state and its separation of religion and politics literally all over the world, it was long thought that theocracies were a thing of the distant past. And yet, to the astonishment of academics and policy analysts alike, theocracies are seeing a massive resurgence, but ironically, in a distinctively modern form. The political scholar Rand Herschel has documented the rise of what he calls constitutional theocracies. Constitutional theocracies are unique in that while their laws have to conform to principles of religious doctrine, nevertheless, those religious doctrines are constitutionally restrained by limits on executive power. Constitutional theocracies often have judicial courts that are well-versed in both secular and religious law, and who serve as important instruments of executive restraint on how far such laws can go in governing the lives of the nation's citizens. So while the religion is enshrined in the basic principles of a nation's constitution, nevertheless, the constitutionality of that enshrinement does, or at least can, place significant limits and restraints on the extent to which the government can impose religiosity and religious norms on its citizens. And what's so absolutely fascinating is that Herschel points out that ever since the Iranian Revolution back in 1979, upwards of half the world's population basically live under some form of constitutional theocracy. This would even include the two most populous nations in the world, India and China. Yes, you heard that right, China. Well, so India is functioning as a default constitutional theocracy with the rise of the BJP, the Bharatiya Janata Party, a Hindu nationalist party, who are implementing what's known as Hindutva, which is more or less a Hindu form of Sharia law throughout the nation of India. China is going through a Confucian revival as we speak, one that has been instigated very much by President Xi, who recognizes that the Chinese people really no longer have that much faith in the old, outdated, modernist communism. And so the regime's communist structures are being rebranded as modern and futuristic expressions of ancient sacred Confucianism centered on the notion of Tianxia, or the mandate of heaven. And the list of these theocratic turns goes on and on. Many have argued that Israel now, under the surge of Orthodox Jewish political influence, has become, in effect, a constitutional theocracy, as has Egypt, Pakistan, Iraq, Kuwait, Yemen, Nigeria, Malaysia, Tunisia, Turkey, and, of course, Vladimir Putin's politics of the sacred that has revivified Russia as an Orthodox nation. And what we're seeing here with the union of religion and the modern state, I would argue, is a very real expression of what theorist Guillaume Faye called archaeofuturism, which predicted that the world of the future would ironically return to its ancient religious traditions, all the while maintaining its scientific technology. This is precisely what we appear to be seeing in this ancient future synthesis of theocracy with modern constitutional norms. Now, the major irony in all of this is that this civilizationless world is the last world that neocon policymakers in D.C. and the State Department could have ever wanted to see. It's a world that overwhelmingly rejects U.S. hegemony and the fleeting liberal international order. Indeed, these theocracies and civilization states represent literally a fundamentally different order, an archaeofuture order that is fast replacing the foreign policy dreams of the neocon. The ultimate irony in all of this is that the neocons in D.C. thought that by bringing down the various dictatorial regimes throughout the Middle East and the color revolutions of the Arab Spring, they would increase neocon liberal international influence in the region, when in point of fact, they are only guaranteeing their failure. Far from realizing a revitalized liberal international order, the policies of the dolts in D.C. have only guaranteed its ultimate demise.